Welcome, everyone, to Partner Up with Amy Carroll. As a communication coach, trainer, speaker, and author, I am delighted to be your host and excited to bring you insights and ideas to help you solve your communication conundrums. This is the 71st episode of my show, Partner Up with Amy Carroll. If you want to find out more about me or what the show's about, feel free to listen to previous episodes on my website, carrollcoaching.com, or go to the voiceamerica.com business channel. You can download the app or you can tune in using your favorite podcast app. Now, if you missed either of the last shows that we played, one on the 24th of December, that was a repeat of a great show interview I did a couple of months ago called Inspirational Leadership for Global Contribution, featuring the inspiring Kristen Envig. And then on December 31st, the show was a repeat of Upgrade Your Executive Presence for Greater Authenticity, featuring the lovely Akim Novak. So feel free to check out any of those. Now today, my guest is Sarah Santacroce. Welcome, Sarah.
So happy to be here. Hi, Amy. Good to see you and speak to you.
Yes. Now, what listeners don't know about us, Sarah, is that we actually don't live very far from each other.
I know. We could almost do this in person.
Yes, right. So Sarah, what is the name of the exact town that you live in Switzerland?
Yeah, I live in Donge, which is just outside of the EPFL.
Oh, okay.
So for Swiss listeners, they will know where that is.
Yes, near Lausanne.
Yes.
Yeah, listeners, you're going to want to know about Sarah, and because this is going to be a really, for me, a very inspiring conversation. Over a decade of running a successful LinkedIn consulting business inspired a yearning in Sarah to create a global movement, encouraging people to bring more empathy and kindness to business marketing. Oh, Sarah, that makes my heart sing. And as a hippie turned business coach, she's written 2 books. Before I tell you the titles of the books, Sarah, I have to know, what did your former hippie life look like?
Oh, okay. It's quite a story. Can we go into that?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, the hippie, it's more like a hippie upbringing because it's really like my childhood that is kind of marked by hippiness. So my parents and a bunch of friends, they were hippies. They never used the term hippie, but if you look at them and you can tell. Okay. So they bought an apartment building together. So 6 families bought an apartment building in Bern, the capital of Switzerland. And everybody had their own apartment, but we basically shared common living spaces together, and we would eat together, and the kids would play together. And there was, I remember these meetings I can't remember, maybe every other week or so, there was a community meeting and all these decisions had to be made together. We had parties, obviously, no hash or any kind of, substances, but it was more like a peace and love environment. And so that's how I grew up. And as a kid, you just think, oh, this is normal. That's, right. That's how it is. But then obviously when I started going to school, I'm like, this is not normal. Nobody lives like that. And so
what night is your community meeting on?
Exactly. So I started hiding that part of me. It was like embarrassing, to a certain extent, to, see my dad being the only one who didn't drive a car to come pick me up, but came to pick me up on his bike. And I'm like, oh, just embarrassed by it all. And so more and more, it was kind of the story that it wasn't part of me anymore, especially then when I moved into the business world and, picked LinkedIn as the one platform, which is very professional and or used to be very stiff and kind of chamber of commerce like. And so I'm like, well, I cannot tell that hippie story to anybody. But as things go, as you grow older and maybe wiser, slowly I came back full circle, and I'm like, you know what? Actually, something is broken inside me, and it's probably because I've never made friends with that story, and it's so much part of me. And I've just, recently come to realize, well, that is exactly who I am and what I bring to business as well. This kind of community aspect and the sharing, the peace and love, and not just business. And so, yeah, that's what the hippie story is.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I asked. And it so fits with who you are today.
Right.
And how you represent yourself. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a great story. So listeners, now it's really going to fit. These are the titles of her 2 books. The first one is The Gentle Marketing Revolution, and her upcoming book is called Selling Like We're Human. When is that going to be released, Sarah?
Yeah, it's actually already released.
Oh,
We've talked a while ago about these. And I'm going to correct here, because the first one is called Marketing Like We're Human. And there's a story in there as well. I had to republish it. So the first one is Marketing Like We're Human. And the second one is Selling Like We're Human.
That's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And Sarah hosts the Humane Marketing podcast, works with heart-centered entrepreneurs to question their assumptions when it comes to marketing and to give them permission to market their business their way, and also the gentle way. Sarah shares a fresh perspective and doesn't shy away from calling things out, like things that no longer work for many of us when it comes to the current marketing model. Her clients sometimes refer to her as the female Seth Godin. That's quite a cool title.
Yeah, it's like this one marketer that I look up to in a way, and he's always kind of done his own thing. So for people who don't know him, he's really kind of a maverick when it comes to marketing, and really encouraging others to question everything around marketing. And that's kind of what I'm all about as well. It's like, well, maybe certain things don't work anymore that we just assumed that that's how marketing and sales and all of that works. So
yeah, I like how you say that. We're riding on assumptions and maybe former paradigms.
Exactly. Yeah.
So in your opinion, what would you say is wrong with what we would refer to as traditional marketing?
Yeah. So in my research and kind of like after my breakdown, because really what happened is I grew up in this online marketing world. I started my business in 2008, and in kind of the social media boom, and trying everything to use marketing and online marketing to build my business and help clients build their business. But a few years ago, I had this breakdown and realizing, well, actually, I can't do it anymore. There's just so much pressure on business owners in terms of using certain marketing techniques. And I started kind of thinking, well, am I the only one thinking like that? Or are there other people also in that situation? Coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs, small business owners. And so I started having conversations with them, and every time this term anxiety came up, like this idea of marketing creating anxiety on both ends. So the receiving end, us receiving marketing, us being the consumers, customers, feeling like there's this feeling of anxiety when seeing something, when being marketed to, and this feeling of shame, never feeling good enough, smart enough, successful enough, and whatever not enough, what other else there is. So like just realizing that there's so much fakeness in this marketing world that creates this idea that we all need to be perfect and super successful and have it all together. And so I think that's really what's wrong with marketing. I think marketing actually can be used as a leverage for good if we use it the right way, because quite frankly, I don't want to necessarily go just the hippie way and say, oh, let's all just live together without selling anything. No, that's not the idea. I think we can use business, and we can actually even use capitalism as a leverage for good, and marketing is a big piece of that. but the way we do it now just doesn't work
Mm-hmm.
anymore. And so that's where I think it's like, well, something else needs to be, needs to be used in order to grow our businesses in a sustainable way.
Yeah. Yeah. When I listen to you, I think, the sense of, like you said, shame and you're not enough, and drilling that message in order to get people to buy and to purchase services. It's just, that's so last year.
Exactly.
That's like, oh, come on, let's get over that, people. No, we can do better than that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. That it feels like this big gap between where we are as customers, and never mind even talking about the pandemic. I mean, even that is just like huge step up in consciousness. But even before that, I think consumers are way smarter. We're way more conscious. And yet a lot of the marketing we see is still, like you said, so last year. It talks to us as if the internet was just invented and it's like the first time we ever see a website. We can tell that if you're telling us this is your last chance, and then we come back the next day and the same message is still there. It just feels like we're not being treated as humans. We're being treated as, you often see this term leads. Well, if you think about it, if we treat everybody like leads, then how can we actually have a business, a human-centric business, and still talk about just leads and funnels and all of these marketing terms that are so inhumane, actually?
Well, it's really making more sense to me now as I'm listening to you describe it. Now, I would love to, and you may not have any right in the top of your head, so let me know, we can come back to it. Though, to hear examples of this humane marketing that you have come across, that might be some universal examples that people may be aware of. What would be some of those?
Yeah. So there's obviously small examples that I see in, fellow entrepreneurs. I'm thinking of yesterday when we had our pre-chat, we talked about Brene Brown. Everybody knows Brene Brown, and she has a big business. She sells services, she sells books. And this is such a good example of, how she markets her giant business in a very humane way. It never feels like, of course, she's also the expert of shame. So
that would be bad. That'd be really bad.
It would be really bad marketing.
You must buy this book, otherwise your life will be miserable.
But it's a good, I think, practice to see how she markets her business and use that as an example, because she has a clear understanding of the power of words and the impact of words, right? So that's a good example. Another one that comes to mind is Patagonia, that is a company that everybody knows, and very, very humane marketing. And what I love about them, obviously, is also is the inclusion of the planet. So it's this triple win that I talk about in my books. It's the win for ourselves, the profits, but the win for the clients, but then also the win for the planet. And they just do an amazing job at including all three and really making it very inclusive. And I never feel like I have to buy the latest, whatever jogging pants or whatever they're selling. It just feels like, this is a good company that shares my values. And I think that's an important piece of humane marketing is sharing more of you and your values and your worldview with your customers, because that's what the conscious client is looking for, much more than 10 years ago. We want to do business and we want to buy from companies that we are aligned with. So that is huge.
I'm very inspired. So the title of the book I wrote is The Ego Tango, and you also see marketing like a tango. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, we kind of already touched upon it a little bit. It's this idea of, right now what we have is this gap, and it's not a tango, because it's like, it feels like one is just dancing alone and the other one is like sitting on the bench, because there's this mismatch in power. So it feels like the companies that are not doing humane marketing, so they are kind of the traditional marketers, the gurus, they are not aligned with the customers. And so how can you dance tango if you're not aligned? So that's why I feel like there's a mismatch in alignment. And in order to be able to dance that tango, it's super important for companies to understand their customers and their clients, and really, lead that way, and lead with empathy. We mentioned empathy before, and kindness, lead that way. And that will lead to a much more beautiful dance that feels, beautiful and inclusive.
Do you have an example of a client who has visibly transformed from traditional to this more humane approach?
I'm thinking of, my clients, entrepreneurs who are on this journey. And what I see is that it takes a lot of unlearning the traditional way, because it's almost like, 20 years of this kind of hype marketing, where there's just certain techniques that we are taught as business owners and marketers. And there's a lot of unlearning. And so the transformation, in the book, I talk about the Chinese bamboo tree. And what happens with the bamboo tree is when you plant it, you water it and water it and water it. And it takes years and nothing grows until finally, I think it's year 5. I'm not sure exactly, but it takes like many years. And then all of a sudden it's like 2 meters or 3 meters tall. And so that's kind of the same evolution I see with these businesses that transform from hype marketing into humane marketing, because building trust takes time. Yeah. It's not just overnight that all of a sudden, if you have been using kind of the aggressive style to all of a sudden, be all empathic and kind, people are like, can we trust her? Right. And so it's really this nurturing that is super important. And then once you get the trust, then the business just takes off, because it's just that transformation.
I want to come back to power. You mentioned that earlier, and I'm very fascinated by power and status. And you may have begun to answer this, though. When you think of unethical marketing, how would you describe the relationship to power with that?
Yeah, this actually came up in a conversation with our common friend, Bettina Palazzo. She was a previous guest on your show talking about ethics. She's an ethics specialist.
And so, rock star.
Yeah. So this came up when I was talking with her, and she was telling me that there's studies and research that shows that the more power, the more risk to unethical behavior. So this is proven in leadership and companies and such, right? And so I was like, well, that's really interesting, because the same thing applies to marketing, it feels to me. The bigger the companies, or the bigger, kind of in my world, the bigger the gurus, the bigger the number of followers and social media influence they have, the bigger the risk that they'll use unethical marketing. It just gives them this impression of power, and somehow it kind of goes the wrong way. Instead of using that power beautifully and having that influence in a beautiful way, it just seems to kind of go the wrong way, and then leads to unethical behavior. I'm curious if you see similar things, maybe not in marketing, but in that relationship with power.
Completely. And it's interesting. I was at a women's event a couple of years ago, and they were talking about how there were leaders. I think they were saying, how men were abusing their power. Right. And yet most of the leaders were men. So I asked a question, I think was something like, well, have people seen this with female leaders? Because I wasn't convinced it was, women are just more ethical than men. I was suspicious that it's to do with the power. Right. And sure enough, some anecdotal evidence, a woman responded later. She said, yeah, when we've seen women who are in the role of power, that they will abuse it as well. Right. Now, and I think it's human nature. And when I say that, I don't even like saying that it's human nature, though. I think we misbehave. It's like with privilege. The more privilege we have, the more likely we are to misbehave and act entitled and act like jerks. Yeah. So I think that when we have, who was it? Spider-Man's uncle, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes. Yeah.
I once quoted Spider-Man's uncle, not knowing it was Spider-Man's uncle. And I gave this great quote and someone said, Amy, that was Spider-Man's uncle. I'm like, oh, well, there we go. Good to know.
Now you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do absolutely see that consistency that we misbehave the more power we have.
Yeah. Yeah. It's how do we change that, right? How do we change that?
I don't think people like to admit it, meaning they're not proud of it. I don't think people run around and go, I'm such a jerk, and so I believe, and I think this is also true with privilege, when we raise people's awareness of the power that they have, of the privilege they have that goes with the roles, with the money, with the position, often I think that's a starting ground for people to hold themselves accountable.
Right. Yeah.
I know it does for me, and I don't think I'm any more ethical than other people. I really believe that most people want to be seen as fair and kind. And if that's true, that's their intention, or the how they see themselves, then saying, okay, well, let's, align that with your actual behaviors. I think that might sometimes be enough to invite people to question how they act and show up and use their privilege and use their power.
That's a good point, because I always say in marketing, I'm not pointing fingers at humans or at individual people. It's a systems problem. It's this idea of this is just the way we have been accustomed or have learned to how to do marketing. And so everybody started accepting it, that this is, we use false urgency, and this is just the shaming and the manipulation and the fakeness. This is just the way it works. Where that's what we need to point the finger at, and not people using the system the wrong way, because I think, it's really a systemic problem, not necessarily a human problem.
So in some ways it takes, so the idea is not to shame humans individually.
Exactly.
Good catch.
Yeah.
And yet when you say it, a systems problem, I can feel myself sort of feel overwhelmed, like, oh, well, what do we do about that? And we're going to be going for a break shortly. And before we do you have any thoughts on that? Or when you describe the challenges?
Yeah, what I my answer to that is really the revolution. And again, maybe the hippie part comes in, right? It's like, well, let's look at the systems problems and let's create a revolution, shaming the system and gathering the people, because the revolution always comes from the people. But this way we're uniting and saying, we want a different way. And yes, we're going to point fingers at the real problem and not at fellow humans.
Okay, great. So when we come back from the break, I'd like us to dive more into, how this humane marketing really works. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yep, definitely.
Okay, wonderful. And listeners, and Sarah, I'm going to check with you in a minute to see how we want people to reach out to you. if you want to connect with Sarah, let's see, we've got her humane.marketing website, right? They can reach you there.
Yep, definitely.
Also, you're obviously on LinkedIn. And the book titles again are
Marketing Like We're Human and Selling Like We're Human.
Wonderful. And if you're ready, listeners, to take your superhero partner powers, speaking of Spider-Man, into the next decade, join me for my online leadership presence course. You can find details on my website, carrollcoaching.com. When we come back from break, we'll be hearing more from Sarah. Stay tuned. You're listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the Voice America Business Channel. Welcome back to Partner Up with Amy Carroll. We've been talking with Sarah Santacroce about human and humane marketing. And before we jump back into some questions for Sarah, at the first half of the show, we mentioned Bettina's interview I did with her back in April. It was April 16th, show number 31. So fascinating interview with Bettina about ethics. So feel free to check that out, listeners. All right. So Sarah, let's talk about this. Proof that humane marketing actually works. Tell us.
Yeah, I think there's lots of proof. We mentioned Patagonia. I mean, what other proof do we need? But any other kind of, purpose-driven brands and companies, I'm thinking of B corporations. I'm thinking of small startups that figured out that this is the way to lead. That's all the proof. It's all there. And to go back to this theme of, this is so last year. Well, imagine 2-3 years from now, 5 years from now, I don't think any of this kind of hype and aggressive marketing will work for customers anymore. We're all done with it. We're all like, we can see through it. We're just like, treat us as human beings. Show us that our values are aligned. Yeah. Show us that you're taking action in terms of, the planet, and not just putting up some stuff on your website and, talking about your mission and then not actually walking your talk. So I think it's really the only way forward. I think companies who are not using a humane approach to marketing will not succeed in the long run. It's this difference between long-term thinking and, make a quick buck.
Right.
What's worked until now is like, the hustling and the make a quick buck. But if you want to be in business for the long term, especially if we think about, the millennials and the Gen X, that they're not going to buy from companies like that anymore. So I think it's really the only way forward.
When you're talking about long term, it made me think of a philosophy my sister Pat has, who developed the model of predator-prey partner. And she talks about to approach every relationship as if it's a long-term relationship, as opposed to a one-night stand.
Yeah.
And boy, getting in the Uber car, you may never see that person again, acting as if this is a long-term relationship. We have a tendency to show up very differently.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with your clients, In the book, I share this line: we both want to sleep well at night. Do we just want to get a quick buck and, fill our bank account? Or do we actually want to sell services or products where we feel like, yes, we can sleep well at night because we give you the absolute best thing for you at this moment? So yeah, it's absolutely for this long-term relationship. I love that.
So you've mentioned hype marketing a couple of times, given some examples. What are some other examples, and how would you reframe those into gentler marketing?
Yeah. Like what we talked about, for example, is this, maybe we didn't talk about it, but one big thing, or let me talk about two things in hype marketing, is this idea of highlighting pain. right? That's what we're taught in marketing, is like, you have to find your client's pain and then really go in on the pain and keep talking about this pain, because then you can actually, say that you have a solution for this pain. So and then they always use the excuse that this is based in human psychology, and that's why you need to talk about this pain, which makes sense. Yes, if you do have a problem, that's what your brain is wired to look for, is for a solution for that problem. So as a marketer, yes, it makes sense to talk about that problem, because then you get people's attention. Where I don't agree is that we have to, again, talk so much about this pain. I feel like it would be much more beautiful, and marketing could be used as a leverage for good if we talked more about the solution, like the aspiration, the future outlook, and not just the pain and the shame and the fear and the negative stuff. So that is one concept. Another concept that is often used, and it's similar, it's this idea of making people understand the gap. So it's called gap selling. It's like, okay, I'm using descriptions and words to make you understand that you are in a really bad place. And then I tell you about my solution that is such utopian and such a miracle.
Over here.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, look at my magic wand over here. And so and what they're telling us is that to help people understand the giant gap that is between. And so that you have no other way than buying that thing, because you want to be on the other side of the gap. Well, again, that just creates anxiety, and it doesn't feel good. And I think it's much more interesting if you look at marketing as a way of healing and really, accompanying the person or the business or whatever it is, to help them guide over a bridge, maybe not, make them fall down the gap first. So it's more like a bridge making and not a gap selling technique. So, yeah. So
as I was listening to you, what came up for me was, I realized that in a way, I think I do this in the middle of trainings. So, Sarah, I'm in multinational companies around the globe, and I go in and I help them get more of what they want more often with less difficulty.
Right.
And halfway through the training, I put up these slides, and one of the slides is the quote from Mahatma Gandhi: "Be the change you want to see in the world."
Right.
And I sarcastically say, okay, survey time. Who in the room is against world peace? There's a long silence, and people look at each other. They look at me and they're like, okay, I haven't been asked that question before. And Sarah, I'm happy to report that no one has raised their hand so far in the many years I've been asking this question. I say, okay, so if you haven't raised your hand, I'm going to assume the opposite, that you are a fan, rah, world peace. We're all for that. Except maybe you don't have the time to donate or dedicate to worthy causes. Maybe you don't want to donate the financial investment to support these causes, even though you might believe in them. So here's what I believe you can do instead. And I talk about how if you're a partner in your life, and meaning you're holding respect for yourself and for the other, whoever you're interacting with, whether it's the Uber driver or the airline check-in counter person or the person over the telephone about your internet connection, that you're showing up with respect for them and for yourself. And that leaves them feeling seen and heard well, I won't go beyond that, right? Seen and heard, which is pretty good. And then that impacts the people, impacts them, which impacts the people around them. So it's the pebble effect, right? The ripple effect. And I said, so I'd like to encourage you that if you are a fan of world peace, consider your time and energy investment showing up in partner in all areas of your life as a hands-on approach to contribution to world peace.
Yeah, that's
you know?
beautiful. Mm-hmm.
And so it feels like I've taken a gentler marketing approach rather than life will be miserable if you don't become a partner. Look at all the power you have when you step into partner and the potential effect it has. Yeah. So that's really cool. I'd never seen it before, that I was in a way marketing for world peace.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. You're a world peace marketer. Yeah, so good.
Oh, so for me, I'm curious to hear you talk about the 7 P's of marketing. Mm-hmm. And there's the traditional 7 P's. So for those of us who are not familiar, maybe walk through some of those and then share what your version is of those.
Yeah. I'll hold up my 7 P's for those who are watching on YouTube. But the idea is not mine. So 7 P's of marketing have existed since the 60s. So it's a concept either
those hippies, man.
Yeah, those hippies came up with, no, it wasn't the hippies, it was the marketers came up with the 4 P's or the 7 P's. There's two different versions. And so it's this concept that you learn in every marketing school. And so I looked at that and I thought, well, if I'm talking about a reframe of marketing, well, we need a reframe of these 7 P's because they're outdated.
And before you go into them, I can kind of read them. So we've got personal power, mm-hmm. people, product, pricing, promotion, partnership, and passion. Okay, great. Yeah. So now for the listeners who are not watching the video, they are caught up to speed.
Yes. Yeah. So the 7 original P's, they included 3 other P's that I kicked out. One of them was process. The other one was physical evidence. And the third one, can't remember right now, but they were outdated and we didn't need them anymore. And so when I looked at them, and they were obviously not represented in a mandala. That's my version of the 7 P's.
Okay.
They were represented in 7 separate circles. And so the first thing I was like, well, they need to be all one circle because they're all integrative pieces. And so all of a sudden I started, my mom, she was sometimes coloring mandalas when I was a kid. And so,
of course she was.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, well, I started seeing them in the shape of a mandala.
That's
and then
great.
I did some research on mandalas, and mandala is actually Sanskrit for a creative process. And I was like, that's exactly what marketing is. It's a creative process. And Jung was using mandalas often in his work.
Carl Jung.
Yes. Wow. He was using mandalas to help people find their center. So it was this creative process that leads you to your center. And so obviously you have the center of the mandala. And I reflected on it and I realized, okay, if you market from within, that's when you market in a humane way. That's when you market in a gentle way. And so the P's, they had to be reshuffled to start with ourselves, because in every marketing program I ever took, every school of marketing always starts with the client mm-hmm. avatar, right. The demographic. It's like we have to chase after this client.
Right.
And what I thought, it was like, well, that's all good. Yes, obviously it's this tango. We need to talk to our client, but it's just as important that we do the work on ourselves first, right. And figure out who we are, what our origin story is. My hippie story, every company has an origin story,
right?
What the purpose is, passion or purpose. Personal power. So personal power is this idea of who am I? What matters to me or my company? What values do I stand for? What's my worldview? So kind of like this deeper inner work had to happen first before I can then look at my clients and find out who they are. And instead of chasing them, it was more like this resonance. I was like, well, actually what happens if you bring more of you to your marketing, that's when resonance happens, because people can just tell who you are. Patagonia, they have a huge crowd of fans because they stand for something.
Yeah.
And so this idea of bringing more of you to your marketing just became really important. I'm going to drop my arm now.
Yes. Oh gosh, you were holding that for a long time. Thank you. Wow. That's such a what do you call it? Paradigm shift.
Yeah, it's
from the client.
Basically, putting it on its head, really. Mm-hmm.
And I've always hated that question whenever I worked with professionals. So what's your ideal client? I don't know. People who, human beings, they have hair and they eat food. You know, and they get mad and happy. And so, I was never able to get behind that approach. And yet when I think about, you know, what do I have? What's my personal story and what do I bring to the game? Then I would light up like, okay, that gave me the energy to focus.
Yeah. It's exactly that. And I think the business world has been so stiff and focused always on results and, chasing after these clients that we didn't realize the power of bringing more humanity to our business. And that starts with, bringing your own stories and showing up with vulnerability and sharing your real purpose, and not just, my purpose is to make money, but like, what is the purpose of the company? So I think that's really where the connection happens. And in the marketing, like we're Human book, it's kind of organized into 3 parts. And the first part is rumble. So this term that Brene Brown also uses. And I love that. This rumbling with who you are, as a person or as a business owner or as a company, what matters to you and how are you different? So this rumbling. And then the second part is rise. So rising above the noise. As marketers, we always want to stand out and be different. Mm-hmm. So you can only do that once you bring more of your unique self into the rising. And so that's when the rising happens. And also rising for me is also giving yourself permission to do marketing differently and say, I'm not doing it like I see everyone else doing anymore. I'm giving myself permission to rise.
Your clients must be so delighted to work with you.
They're relieved. Yeah.
Relieved is a great word. Relieved. And possibly it's a little scary for them because you're saying, hey, this is what about you and what you have to offer the world as a unique individual. And maybe for some people, that's a little scary to identify or figure that out or dare to claim it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's exactly that. In a way, we're asking for more bravery in marketing and not just copy paste. And there's so much copy paste in marketing. And it's funny because I share this parable that I don't know if you've heard this before. So this guy is on the ground searching for his keys. And so a woman passes by and says, can I help you? Have you lost something? And he says, yeah, I've lost my keys. And so she gets on her knees and starts helping him to look. And after 5 minutes, still couldn't find anything. And so she asks him, are you sure that you lost them here? And he points to across the street. He's like, no, I lost them over there. She's like, why are you telling me this now? Why are we looking here? And he says, well, this is where the light is. And so I'm telling that story because often in marketing, it feels like that's what people want to do. They want to look where the light is, and the light is always on the easy things, the doing stuff, the how do I get more leads? How do I fill my webinars? How do I find out how to do Facebook ads? That's actually easy because you either pay money or you learn how to do it. And it's the easy part. But the more difficult part is the inner work, is the figuring out, well, what's my purpose? What's our company's origin story, and how do we bring more of us into our marketing? That's not where the light is. That's often where the dark nights of the souls are happening. And so you're right when you say it's like, yeah, it's probably a bit scary sometimes, but that's when the good stuff happens.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know this song and video. And so if you don't, you definitely want to go check it out on YouTube. It's a theme for the work I do, and it may also be for you. It's called Brave by Sarah Bareilles.
No.
And
I do.
So the words are fantastic. Say what you want to say, let the words spill out. So it's really saying, speak your truth. That's how I interpret that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second part is the video itself. It's a group of individuals who are in public places, some of the crazy places like a gym, another person's in a library, and when somebody's in a mall, they're attempting to get strangers to dance with them.
Okay.
It's scary enough to dance in public, to dance by yourself, and then to try to engage someone else. And so with the combination of the video, watching these people, plus the music and the song itself is fantastic. I find it so inspirational. And that's what I'm also asking my clients to do, is be brave. Don't necessarily do what is expected of you from other people or what you think society wants from you. Do what you believe is right and fair and true.
Yeah. Exactly. Same thing here. Yeah. So
as we're starting to wind down, I have a few more minutes, and I'd like to hear from you. Maybe it's just kind of a gentle question, though. How do we make marketing beautiful, and what does beautiful mean for you?
Yeah. I think there's so much opportunity to make marketing beautiful. If you ask, random people on the street, do you think marketing is beautiful? I would say 99.9% of people would say, no, we hate marketing and we don't trust marketers, and marketing is definitely not beautiful. And so there's so much opportunity to bring beauty into marketing. And for me, beauty is not just, pretty colors and pretty websites. It's really this beauty of experience, of a kind of, belonging comes up as well as a term, and creativity, being different. Like human stories are beautiful, right? And so that's what I understand when I say, that's what I mean when I say bring more beauty to marketing. And so again, it has to do with bravery to say, I'm not going to just use that, 5-step list and copy paste and use mine, but really come up with other things and make people feel and experience certain things. I think that's what everybody is craving right now, is not just the transactional, but really the transformational part of marketing. And I'm looking at this book that I used I'm going to grab it, that I used in kind of the research for my work, is Daniel H. Pink, A Whole New Mind. And I just love this.
WHOLE, Whole New Mind.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And the subtitle of this book is Why Right-Brainers Will Rule the Future. So again, it's like, we come from this world that is very analytical, left brain oriented, results, numbers, statistics, and profit. And what he's actually saying in his book is, well, actually, who will rule the future is the right-brainers. And so to me, that means we are craving more beauty, including in business and marketing and sales. So that's what I mean by beauty. And once you become aware of that, you'll start noticing the beautiful stuff, the beautiful marketing or the beautiful businesses. My friend Steve Steve, I can't remember his last name. He wrote the book, Beautiful Business. And so, just this idea of thinking, what would a beautiful business look like? What would a beautiful marketing look like?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's where we're heading.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that is a great inspirational thought to end on. Though before I do let you go, I really would like to hear, what is a call for action that you would offer to listeners?
Yeah, the call for action, I would really encourage people to become more aware of marketing, how it makes them feel when they receive emails or when they see offers. How does it make you feel? Does it make you feel beautiful and included? And, does it feel gentle when you read them or not? And start saying no to things that don't make you feel good, that make you feel fearful or in shame, and just kind of starting there, and then going on that journey towards humane marketing.
Thank you, Sarah. I guess for me, I will invite listeners to send me your communication conundrums, clashes, challenges, mishaps, blunders, and successes, either via email or social media. I'll read them and discuss them on future shows. And you can reach me at amy@carrollcoaching.com. Now, to reach out to Sarah, you've got her LinkedIn. You can connect with her there. Let me spell her last name, first and last name. Sarah, Sarah, and Santacroce, SANTACROCE.com, or go directly to humane.marketing. And again, the titles of your book are
Marketing Like We're Human and Selling Like We're Human.
Wonderful. Now, listeners, I want you to be sure to switch on, tune in, listen up, and be inspired next week. I'm going to be interviewing Nancy Watt. We'll be discussing her use of applied improv and adaptability quotient in her training sessions and workshops, and how she uses case studies and social experiments and the results to help transform lives. Nancy delivers powerful, creative, memorable training sessions using tools, techniques, and improv theater. In fact, in the past 4 years, Nancy's been rated as one of the top 5 leadership workshops at Microsoft's Global Conference. So you're not going to want to miss that interview and chat on January 14th. Feel free to check out my website for more information, carrollcoaching.com. That's 2 R's and 2 L's. And feel free to connect with me on my social media channels, Amy Carroll Coaching. Finally, if you're game for more, I'm going to be hopping over to Facebook Live for 5 minutes or at 5 minutes past the hour for a short chat on today's call, or on today's chat rather, with Sarah. Sarah, thank you. It's been a lovely conversation.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me, Amy.
And listeners, thank you. You've been listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the Voice America Business Channel. Happy partnering, everyone.